What's up, guys?
Hey, what's up? How are you?
I'm doing well. So, technology and stuff. A couple years ago, the three of us sat around. I can't remember if somebody else was with us, but we sat around in different contexts talking about game bandwidth product. And it was, I think, that episode in a different life. A lot of people had a lot of good questions. They learned a lot, but I think it's probably important. There's, everything's always in a state of transition, but it's always good to go back to some basic fundamentals, right? And
it's the only thing that matters are the fundamentals.
I think we divorce ourselves from fundamentals all the time.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair statement.
The only thing that matters. Well, how about this? In technology, the only thing that truly matters are the fundamentals. Take a look at what happened to, for example, Boeing, right? They went from a company where all of the executives worked basically where the plant was, very engineering focused, made brilliant products, to let's go put the executives somewhere where there are no planes being made.
That's a bad idea.
People in charge that don't have even a STEM background, right? And so what happens? You lose track of your fundamentals, and then you have a 737 MAX that falls out of the sky, right?
Gravity sucks sometimes.
Definitely.
Gravity's amazing. Without it, we would be drifting somewhere much colder, like Chicago.
Thank you to Archimedes. Eureka.
Game bandwidth theory, man. Is that what we're talking about? You want to get ready?
We are. I wanted Simon to kind of give us a refresher on
he talked about
the Pony Express.
Yeah, the zero, was it 0, 1, and infinite?
That was a totally different conversation.
Was that a different conversation?
0, 1, and infinity.
There was carrier pigeons, and there was
plane hacking. You hacked a plane. Well, you didn't hack a plane.
No.
Well,
it could be done though.
It can be done.
It can be done. That's
really scary. Can we talk about that? Is that a
thing? We just threw Boeing under the bus once. Let's not do it twice.
But it doesn't have to just be their planes. I mean, it depends on how they set the network up on the plane. That's the issue. And a lot of times it isn't set up well, which you demonstrated live on a plane.
Wish it was only a lot of times, pretty much all the time.
Yeah. So we're not talking about that. We're not going to talk about hacking a plane.
We're talking about carrier pigeons.
We're talking about carrier pigeons. We're not talking about 0, 1, and infinity.
0, 1, and infinity is a design pattern.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that's a different kind of a realm.
We've had a lot of great conversations about this stuff, but
so game bandwidth,
canary pigeons. There's a lot of context. There's things that are changing right now, and people are doing what I would think are some okay things to do. Some of them are insightful, and some are just kind of head scratching as being generous. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you setting money on fire?
Yeah. Well, the reason why is because of a lack of understanding of the fundamentals, which is what I keep on coming back to, right? If you're talking about technology, right, if you don't understand the science behind what's going on, every decision that you make will be flawed, guaranteed. And because if you don't grasp the underlying either physics or math or whatever, right, you're just going to be doing things that you think make sense, which may not add up. Right?
Do physics change? I'm forever telling people we're not defying physics. We're not defying physics, but sometimes I almost wonder, can you defy physics?
Well, you can probably expand on existing models, right? You can get somewhere there, right? But I'll give you a simple example of something where, people, they don't understand fundamentals and come to very bizarre conclusions. Every house has an electrical panel, right? It has a certain number of amperage coming in. It goes into the panel, it distributes, the panel has breakers on it, and then it distributes the electricity to your house, right?
Right.
And in this present world of COVID going on everywhere, what's happened? Everyone is now stuffing their house full of electronics, right? And so you start running out of power, right? Not enough amperage, start pulling breakers, this, that. So everyone now wants to start plugging more things in, adding breakers, this, that. And you will not believe that every single licensed electrician that I talked to all came back with some kind of strange concept regarding the number of breakers in the panel and its relationship to the amount of current being delivered from the power company and the messengers. Like they all say something, every single one of them, licensed electrician, said something to the extent of, oh, your panel is only 150 amps or your panel is only 200 amps, so you shouldn't have too many breakers on it, which are like, this many of amps, because when you add up all those breakers, that might be like, bad. But like, this is a complete fundamental lack of understanding as to what's going on. The breakers are only there to protect the cable that it's connected to, right?
And when you reach peak, it flips.
It flips.
Right.
So you've got this panel and it's got a 200 amp breaker coming in. What's that to protect? Well, the panels, itself and the messenger lines coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got, 20 amp, 15 amp, 50 amp, whatever breakers on the panel. What's that to protect? The cables going out of the panel, right? Mm-hmm. Adding up the breakers has nothing to do with the input. Yet every single licensed electrician that I talked to, every single one, and I did like 6 or 8 of these, and I kept on talking, and just after a while, it almost became a game. Like, I wonder if this guy is going to say something like, and it's just like, dude, these numbers, they have nothing to do with one another, but it feels good to add them up, right? But it's a fundamental lack of understanding, and that's a really simple thing. And why is this a problem? Because in COVID age right now, right, you're going to have people that basically say, well, you probably shouldn't add that breaker there. What are you talking about?
That's the purpose of the breaker.
That's the whole point of the distribution panel. The whole point of the distribution panel is so that you can oversubscribe the messengers. Lack of fundamental lack of
I
understanding.
actually just ran into this in
pervasive.
You're going through remodel, right?
Well, no, I've got, on the side, I play around with real estate investment. I play around. I've got a couple rent houses. I've got one that I'm in the process of selling. The one I'm in the process of selling right now that just exited the option period. So it looks like it's going to go through, but there's always a negotiation point. Everything's always a negotiation.
Right.
So completely remodeled this house, except for I didn't change out the panel. Panel's a little bit older, but it's not a huge house. And to Simon's point, there's plenty of space. It's all still within code. And their electrician came out and said, the breakers exceed what adds up for what's coming in from the utility company. I went, huh? So? And they came back and said, we want $3,000 off the sale of the house to replace that, or we want you to replace this. You know what? You get your own warranty. If it's going to push the deal through, do what you want to.
You should have them put the credit toward education to learn about this.
What, Khan Academy or at
learn
a certain
about what this
point,
is for.
my goal is to sell the house.
Right.
And to sell it for a certain amount of money in profit, not to argue with people that don't understand, including the electricians.
Yes.
Part of it, I sometimes wonder if the plumber and the electrician, they're just...
Could be that, that they're simply leveraging the fact that most people don't understand, right? Could be any number of things, but it's utterly ridiculous.
Now, what happens when you fill up your breaker panel?
Well, then you start getting, duplex and triplex breakers. Or then you can also invest in replacing the panel. But I'll tell you, I just ran into this situation recently, right? The panel had 16 slots, okay, 8 slots on either side, right? And the original breakers, the 240 amp breakers, 240 volt breakers, right? They were double slot.
Good.
Right. So if you have a 240 volt breaker and it's double slotted, then that means that you take, the 2 conductors, right? One for each one of the phases, right? Connect to it and off you go. But you can buy a triplex breaker, which has 4 conductors that plug into it. The center 2 conductors are the 240, and then you get the 120 on the top and the 120 and below. And so if you do that, all of a sudden the 16 slots, they basically become 32, right? So if you just rip out all those breakers and you put them all with triplex breakers in, you're good. And that's another thing that, the electrician will come by and say that, oh, let's go do $5,000 upgrade, right?
I actually do need
nah.
to make a note of this because actually,
It's $27
I just did a
for a triplex.
for a triplex breaker.
I just did
$27.
And how much is it installed
thing.
with a licensed electrician?
Well, first of all, you have to find a licensed electrician that can add.
That's not part of the test.
Guys,
We do like electricians around.
I was going to say, I definitely don't want it to come across like we're the snootiest people in the world, because that's who wants to watch those assholes talk about technology. But I do think that's great information. I did not know that. I know you can do that with the break.
Yeah, and it plays right in hand with what we were saying before, right?
Because I thought I was going to have to buy a brand new panel.
Yeah.
That was the thing the guy told me. He's like, you're full, you got to get a new panel.
Yeah.
And that's like a 9-10 grand to get a new panel.
Well, not only that, you got to call the power company if you want to do it safely, right? Unless you're going to do a live.
And you have to pull a permit
Yeah,
with the city, pay your taxes, all those things.
Right.
So
It's a major project. I didn't realize that was a thing.
So we're turning this into a home remodeling course.
There we go.
Granite countertops.
You're doing a remodel and you need to fix your breakers.
Your COVID remodel. It is amazing, though, how much money have you seen Home Depot and Lowe's? They've just been crushing it for the last 18 months.
Well, no one's vacationing.
Yeah.
And everyone's at home. So it's like, if you're not vacationing and you're at home, what would you most likely spend that money on?
I think my
new breaker panel, because your electrician gave you terrible information.
You could do that.
That's what you would spend.
Due to lack of fundamentals.
My best investment could be putting a RXG into my home. That somehow does not allow home improvement TV shows to be on.
That would also be.
Because I think ultimately that's the big driver. Everybody's watched everything else on Netflix, so they just watch all the home improvement shows and buy paint.
Too many ideas.
Yeah. All of a sudden, everybody wants to put header beams in every room. So, game bandwidth product.
Game bandwidth product, right? So fundamentally, let's just stick with it from the perspective of wireless for now, right?
Sure.
The idea is that the further you go, the less throughput your mechanism is going to have, given a steady state level of technology, right? Now, so if you basically take gain, which you can think about as distance, right? More power, less power. You kind of multiply that by bandwidth or your throughput, so to speak, right? Something like that, right? That becomes sort of like a constant, so to speak, right? Until someone invents better coding. The technology gets better, in which case then that constant increases, and everyone that's playing this game, right, can either go further or, put more stuff through it, or some combination of something like that, right? So what does this mean? This means something that you intuitively know to be true. If I have my cellular telephone and it is talking to a cell tower, which is 2 miles away, I can get 20 megabits per second on a really good day, something like that, 50 megabits per second, given the current, LTE, 5G, whatever you've got going on, right? Reason why I get that, and it's not something like 300 megabits per second, which I could get with Wi-Fi, is because the Wi-Fi radio is 10 feet away from me. Right? And so we all have this experience. We all intuitively know this. But the important part about this is that it's critical to apply that to every decision that you make with technology, because people will have a very strong tendency to market to you things which violate this fundamental principle, which is exactly like the panel, right? The electrical panel, right? Because it's like, oh, well, if you add these numbers up, it's right, and it feels good and sounds right, but it's complete nonsense.
Completely wrong.
They're independent quantities, man, right? Unless you're going to pull sustained currents, then there's all sorts of but basically they have nothing to do with one another. And when even though you know that this is the case, because you're not thinking about it, because you're not applying yourself, you're not applying the fundamentals, then you're going to make all sorts of crazy mistakes with it, right? And so what you should just simply fundamentally always remind yourself with respect to wireless is this thing that you intuitively know. If I'm going to go a really long distance, the amount of stuff I can stuff through that long distance is going to be less than if I go a really short distance. If I want to communicate with that new rover we have on the Mars that has its friendly helicopter next to it, right? The amount of data I can put through that pipe is going to be tiny. And so if I want that video of that Martian helicopter flying, it's going to take a really long time to transfer it.
Very long.
Because it's a really huge distance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's not around the block.
It's this fundamental concept that we all intuitively know to be true, it's really just amazing how often people just forget. It's like, oh, it's like magic, so this new thing that's invented can violate this principle. And, it doesn't work like that. It never works like that.
Yeah. But when you see the marketing for it, all of a sudden you see things like 5G's out there. In 5G, people get in their head that this is going to go a really long distance. And
sure, same distance 4G went.
Yeah, it depends on the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And the spectrum is going to make a determination on how far you can actually push that. So, I would say that most people remember or still even have AM radio somewhere in their car.
Sure.
It's a radio, so
Still a
it's
thing.
I think every
RF.
car has AM radio in it.
Except electric cars.
Electric cars don't.
No.
Yeah. Drivetrain interference.
That's evil.
Yeah.
There's some really great nonsense on AM radio.
There
You
is.
can catch like truckers and all kinds. There's some great weird crap out there.
Like what?
I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, but
I thought it was all Politico talk.
um,
Maybe a baseball game.
yeah, that's right. Baseball games. It's true.
They're back. They're back. They even have fans in the stands.
Like real ones, not the cardboard ones.
At least here we have fans.
Hmm.
I think we, as a general area, got slapped on the wrist by society for having max capacity at opening day.
Ooh, yeah, you
So,
can't.
yes.
That sounds.
El
risky.
Jefe said you should not do that,
Well,
and did it anyway.
did it anyway. It's kind of the Texas
It
thing,
did,
right?
yeah, it didn't implode, so it's fine.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
It's fine. So I'm not picking
Is
a
it fun?
side in it.
Is it
I'm not picking a side in anything. I'm very much just
Switzerland.
Leave me alone. Yeah, I want to
Gotcha.
be Switzerland.
Gotcha. It's a beautiful country. Have you been?
I have.
I've not been. I was in Iceland. That was pretty great.
Spent a few days in Interlaken once upon a time.
Mm.
Yeah,
Fun place.
did you ski over there?
I did not. It was during the summer.
No,
It was,
that would make it difficult.
Though I do understand that there's a giant glacier up there that
Yes.
you can ski in the summer. I've never tried that. Not
During
that
the
glacier.
summer?
Yeah.
It'd be like going down ice, though, wouldn't it?
I don't know.
It's no fun. I've done that in New York before. It was all ice. It was not fun.
I have done that up at Whistler, and it was pretty cool. Sometimes it does have blizzards up there in June. It's fun pictures I have from that.
I
But
have.
nowadays you can do it indoors.
I have skied. Wait, you can ski indoors in Whistler?
No, in New Jersey, actually, of all places.
You can ski indoors in Jersey.
Yeah.
Like a big indoor snow mountain.
It's the biggest one I think, at least in North America, and it's in a shopping mall about 20 minutes outside Manhattan.
How big is the run? Is it like a?
About 1,000 foot, something like that.
Okay, that's not good.
It's like a beginner hill kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
I did ski Whistler. That was pretty amazing. That was something, and it was like 45 minutes to an hour if you took your time going through carving through the trails. It was pretty dope.
I'd like to get up there.
It was really, really cool. People up there were really nice as well. A lot of Australians.
That's
Yeah,
odd.
it was like all the workers were from Australia. They had like an exchange program or something for like, I don't know.
That's true of
And
most ski
what
resorts, actually.
do the Canadians go and do in Australia?
That's a great question. I don't know.
They learn how to navigate the outback.
They learned that everything in Australia will kill you if you take your eye off of it. I have no idea. That's a great question. I didn't ask, but it was kind of like, man, you have an accent too. Like you also have an accent. It's like, yep. It's like, wow, there's a lot of Aussies up here. It's kind of unusual.
So actually, most of the ski resorts, their seasonal workers are like college students from
Yeah.
the southern hemisphere because it's their summer.
Yep, that's a good
So
point.
if you go skiing, like most ski resorts in North America, you'll end up with people that are running the lift that are from like Argentina and stuff like that. It's pretty common.
So we were talking about game
Sorry,
product
yeah.
before skiing. So some examples from the past, because kind of skipped over a little bit of that. The easy way to think about it is if I got to carry something a long way, you use the Mars rover, but something maybe a little bit more within our own planet, would be carrier pigeons.
Sure.
Carrier pigeons got to carry a note. They can't carry a lot, but they could go forever.
They can go for a long distance. Right?
Or maybe even an African swallow can migrate and carry a coconut type thing.
It's a great Monty Python.
I'm just sneaking that one in there. It's one of my favorite movies.
So, carrier pigeon.
Carrier pigeon.
So
Long distance.
What would you compare in our present day communications a carrier pigeon to? AM radio, anything in IT world, what would be that carrier pigeon?
That we actually use? I mean, you could definitely say that, it's something like an AM radio, or it's something like any of, like ham radio type things. But most of us
we still use ISDN at all?
No. Most of us that are doing commercial solutions, especially for wireless, right? None of those really technologies really, they don't really matter to us, right? In terms of like really long distance wireless, right? The thing that we mostly use these days is going to be the public cellular network, right?
Okay.
Right. That's something where you can go miles with that.
That's going to be your sub-6 bands. A lot of like T-Mobile's network,
something
what they're
like
building
that.
on.
Like that, right?
You're not going to get the 5G speeds that a Verizon or AT&T that are doing ultra wideband are doing, but you're going to get greater distance.
You're going to get huge distance.
You're going to get big distance benefit, and you're going to get 100, 200 meg. That's our modern day carrier pigeon.
And then something similar to that would be like some of the wireless ISP, products that you can buy, right? Like
5.8 stuff.
No, like 900 megahertz stuff, right?
LoRaWAN.
LoRa would be a great example. But actually, you know what? That is the perfect example. The modern day carrier pigeon is probably LoRa. That stuff, I held it in my own hands, and we took a car, drove it down, and it was like half a mile.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and this stuff it costs like $20, right? Mm-hmm. So you can get a really low bandwidth signal, very low throughput signal, I should say, going half a mile for like $20. So that's a great carrier pigeon.
Yeah, and that's for IoT applications. Low bandwidth, not real chatty. They just squeak every now and then.
Sensor data, that's about it, right? So that would be a great kind of example of that kind of a thing. And then at the all the way other end of the spectrum is, of course, our latest, greatest, most fun Wi-Fi stuff, like the Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6 type stuff, which, if you change your distance by like 10 feet, even that has a dramatic change in the amount of throughput that you can get. Just before I came here, actually, I ran and did this little test. I have in my garage, I actually put a Wi-Fi 6 AP, a very expensive one.
Commercial
solution.
Commercial.
Right. $1,300 AP. Right? And I put it, so my car is parked in the garage. I put the AP right above the driver's side headlight.
Okay.
Right? So you can imagine it's up there on the ceiling. And I took my laptop and I put it square center on the hood, which was pretty much the only stable place I could get on the hood because of the slope and this and that, right? So it's going from the ceiling down there, it's not that, maybe 5 feet, right? Nothing in between, right? And I got 33 megabytes per second sustained throughput. It's transferring multi-gigabyte file, okay? I took that laptop and I moved it to the roof of the car on top of the driver's side, not the center, right over the driver's side. It dropped to like 26 megabytes per second. I took that laptop and I put it on the center of the trunk, right above the spoiler, right? The only other stable place. You want to guess what it dropped to?
I don't.
19 megabytes per second. This is another great example, right, of this gain bandwidth product principle, right? Using exactly the same technology, all I did was move my laptop linear distance of maybe 10 feet. And I went from 33 megabytes per second to 26 megabytes per second to 19 megabytes per second. Same time, same connection.
And that's not influenced by the pattern that's coming out of the AP.
Well, yeah, it's got one of those, beamforming, this, that, whatever. But I let it sit there, and of course it bounced up and down while it found the correct radiation pattern. And no, I wasn't doing crazy things like turning on, microwave ovens, trying to, influence the results or anything like that, right? And there was nothing in between. This is my garage, right? So above the car, there was nothing, right?
Clean air.
Right? Clean. Everything's clean. And I did that because I knew that you wanted to talk about this. And I was thinking to myself, well, what is the simplest example that I can just show that maybe everyone would really get? And that was this, right? I just moved my laptop.
Yeah.
Right? So all I have to do is I just move, and then all of a sudden, the results I get are dramatically different. 10 feet. That's almost nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a commercial grade AP versus the one that a lot of people put in their homes when they're upgrading, putting all these new electronics in their houses.
Yeah.
And they're putting one single AP to try to cover 2 floors and going, oh, there's a wall in the way. Actually, most people don't even know there's a wall in the way. There's the magic of RF. Everybody thinks RF is magic and penetrates through everything. It's the oddest thing.
Doesn't it go right through concrete?
How about steel?
Steel?
Yeah.
Through water, trees?
Water, trees, sure. Anything that causes a reflection.
Yeah.
And almost invite people sometimes to go watch a bad sci-fi show where they were bouncing lasers off of mirrors and stuff like that to hit a trick shot. RF's going to bounce around once it hits something that's solid. It's going to bounce around or it's going to die. It gets absorbed into that. So, all right, so we were talking about 5G a little bit, but there's different levels of 5G. So, and I think people unless you're really in an industry, people get confused about this, right?
Yeah, so like 5G,
we were talking
magic.
5G is magic. 5G is everything. 5G, and then brought up T-Mobile. They're in a sub-6 spectrum. Might be worth it to define what's sub-6 and what's millimeter wave, real quick.
Well, I think rather than getting into too much detail about that, I think the simple thing that you should understand is that 5G doesn't mean one thing.
No.
Right? There's actually multiple implementations, and it's all under this one word umbrella of 5G. Right? And different people, when they say 5G, they mean completely different things. Right?
They do.
One person that says 5G might mean something which is sort of sensible, which is to say that you kind of replace the 3G, the 4G, the older stuff that did long-range cellular with this new 5G, and then you get a little bit faster. In fact, probably in a really good case like that one. Right? Then you've got the other people that are saying 5G, and what they're talking about is the use of an entirely different spectrum. Something like 50, 60 gigahertz, right? Ultra high frequency stuff. And so then you can get ultra wideband, right? Unbelievable amounts of throughputs for really short distances, which fits exactly with what we were talking about, right? If you want a lot of throughput, you want a lot of bandwidth, you got to go short distance.
Yeah.
If you want to go really long distance, you can't do that, right? And so they're talking about getting things like 50, 60, 70, 100 megabits per second with 5G, and yes, that's true, but it will never go through a window, and it will only work in a few places where you can afford to even put that equipment, right? Because unlike the Wi-Fi technology, which is designed to be affordable, right? The radios we're talking about to kind of do that flavor of 5G, the high frequency stuff, it's not, affordability was not really number one on their design criteria. In fact, a lot of people that sell that stuff would probably appreciate the fact that it is quite expensive as it helps relieve quota. Right?
Yeah, quota is a big driver.
That's true.
The driver.
Why is 5G so misunderstood? Is it just like it's the next thing, so it's just like it's the silver bullet?
I think it's misunderstood because we like it when people misunderstand things, right? This is exactly what I was talking about with the electrical panel.
Yeah. Expectations are created. Intentional expectations are created, and 5G is kind of one of these weird ones because I think it also is represented. There's been almost an arms race with it. not just between carriers, but even geopolitically, right? We've seen that with the stuff with Huawei and others over the past couple of years. But I think there's a fair amount of people that want it to be misunderstood, and not necessarily misunderstood, but they want it to represent everything's faster all the time, because all we silly people care about is I want to do things faster. I can't do, people blame VR's adoption because it's not fast enough, right?
You have to wear an encyclopedia book on your face. That's the other side, the other reason it didn't take off. It's horrible.
It's that, but even if you could contextually see things in real time like you're supposed to, it takes a ton of bandwidth. And you're not going to walk around on a 5G network right now, no matter how fast you make it. If you're sitting under a ultra wideband antenna, you're not going to watch the Super Bowl in VR. You're just not. There's not enough bandwidth and processing right there in that little form factor. Or am I off my rocker?
No, absolutely.
So,
to a large extent.
You really think that's more about the network and not about the fact that you just have a clunky piece of crap on your head?
That's what I was going to say.
Because I feel like that the network, not taking that away, yes, you do need excessive power in order to really make that a thing, but.
Well, maybe bad example, but from a marketing perspective, what was the first things people started talking about with 5G? I'm going to do remote surgery.
It was like remote, autonomous everything, cars, trucks, remote surgery. Yeah,
the network is not the problem, which is what you're saying, right? So you want to go do autonomous surgery? Yeah, knock yourself out. Let me tell you, the network is not the problem. There's a lot of things that are problems, right? Network, it would help, but fundamentally,
network's not the issue.
But if you could get all these other things right, then you could potentially do this. And what does that invite people to do? Invest billions and billions of dollars into building this new infrastructure, right? Which I'm not saying that there's not a use case for 5G. I'm downtown Dallas, there's ultra wideband. I get on time and it's super fast. It's super cool.
It's great.
It's awesome. But when I go jogging through downtown here and I end up in the next neighborhood over that doesn't have the 5G ultra wideband radios on the lampposts that are, they're significantly lower to the ground. Simon's point, can't put them up on big towers because they can only go a short distance. But I don't really notice a difference in my day-to-day life. So use case wise, it's a little bit, I think, overstated right now.
Marketing.
It could be the marketing.
Is it the marketing departments are the ones that are doing it?
Marketing departments lead everything.
They do.
You got to create a demand for something.
That is true.
Right?
That's true.
Whether or not it's got a net benefit. And I'm not saying, I do think that 5G has a benefit to it, but I think probably a better way to say it is 5G has been positioned over the last few years as the one RF technology to rule them all, right? And the reality behind that is that's a really bad idea.
Yes.
There's a lot of other technologies that have a use case that ultimately drive down costs. It's lower cost per bit. It's a better end user experience, whether it's commercial or residential, business, consumer grade stuff. There's a combination. You're putting together a puzzle. And a lot of the marketing around it is, we get here first, we do this first, this is the best thing ever. Until the next best thing ever comes along.
Right. It also reinforces like the silver bullet that I think the tech world suffers from so much.
Yeah.
We're always like, this finally we got the thing. Now all of our problems are solved. And it's like, it's still not gonna be the one thing. It's a piece of the pie, it's not the whole pie.
Yeah. On the other end of it, the unlicensed, we're starting to see different geographies adopt 6 gigahertz for Wi-Fi. It's still in ratification stage with the FCC here in the States, but I think it's India, Brazil, and a couple others have said, yep, 6 gigahertz, we're giving this basically 1,000 gigahertz worth of contiguous bandwidth for Wi-Fi. What do you think that's going to do to Wi-Fi?
Well, I think it'll take some time, but I think that will have a much bigger impact on the population as a whole than a lot of the things that we've talked about so far. And the reason is because of the cost. Anything that is running in those
unlicensed bands where the clients are built into every device or will eventually be built into every device that's being sold, even the inexpensive ones, right? That is going to have a much bigger impact on the cost of delivery per gigabyte of data than anything that you do with respect to licensed bands and things that where the radio is only present in a high-end device, right? So great example of that is the CBRS stuff, right? And so if you think about the spectrum of gain bandwidth product, you could put the ultra high speed Wi-Fi kind of here, short distance, right? Super throughput, reasonable consistent. And then all the way over there, you could talk about like the really long range cellular stuff, 4G, 5G for the long range at the lower frequencies and stuff like that, or 900 megahertz and stuff. Or
9, 19, 21, 23.
LoRa, stuff like that, lower bandwidth, huge distances. So somewhere in between, that's where we have some of this fun stuff like CBRS and stuff, right? But, what happened there for the longest time is that people kept on saying, well, yeah, this will become great as soon as we see the radios being everywhere, right?
In our phones.
But like the radios never ended up being everywhere, right?
They're not everywhere. They're in some of them. They're just not turned on by default.
And only in the very expensive phones.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you have to have like $800,000, $900,000 phone to have this CBRS radio. That's just not tractable. Who's that going to impact? It's going to impact a handful of people that can afford that, right? Or you need to have one of these like a router of some kind that's got that built in, right? Cradle Point is a great example of that. There are others, right? Which kind of fits that. And then you can convert that, right? Convert that to what? Wi-Fi. Why? Because that's what
Ubiquitous,
everything's got it. It's a lower cost per bit. Even if you're on a CBRS network, while it's not the traditional carrier, there's a new group of carriers and SaaS providers. There's still a monthly recurring charge.
Sure.
That does not exist in Wi-Fi.
No. Right. So, when you're talking about, well, what will the 6 gigahertz stuff do? It's going to have, in my opinion, a much bigger impact because the cost is so much lower. So naturally, the adoption is going to be so much higher, right? And, it's obviously going to have, a cleaner spectrum because there's less things in that at the moment. But I will say this.
It'll clean up 2.4 for sure. 2.4 will probably end up being IoT du jour.
Probably.
Not for the little bitty chatty things that LoRaWAN's working on, but as you get more data that's bigger packets of data, a lot more stuff. 2.4 gets, everybody leaves 2.4 and goes to 5 and 6.
Sure. And I think a lot of that has already happened, right? So, most of our laptops and things like that, they default to 5 these days, right?
They default to 5, but there's still things where there's legacy applications that are out there. I've seen one recently where it was, it's a bus yard, public transportation, and they've got multiple radios on each bus for different functions. Most of them are 2.4. Think about what it would take to actually go and upgrade all those. There's a time lag, but 2.4 I think eventually gets abandoned, but you've still got to convince people, you got to change the stuff that you're using right now that you've got a sunk cost into, right?
When you say abandoned, you mean abandoned by, data-driven, like kind of like laptop type devices that we have, right? Because obviously it's never going to be abandoned by some of those other things, right?
Right.
Because it's not going to happen. Right?
Until it breaks and you have to get the new one, and whenever you get that new one.
Well, and that assumes that new one is using something other than 2.4, because it might be using 2.4 anyway, because it's unlicensed, right?
Well, 5 is unlicensed.
But you get shorter distance with 5, right? You get lower penetration with 5. If you're talking about a bunch of buses, right? And they're doing...
big Faraday cages.
Right. And they're doing relatively low bandwidth stuff. Like, why would you want to move 5? That may actually be a disadvantage. If anything, in that kind of an environment, what you might want to move to instead? You might want to go the other direction. You might actually be like, oh, we should change those buses, from 2.4. We should put them on 900 megahertz with LoRa or something like that. Because I can get, much more range with that. I don't need to send that much data, right? And I wouldn't need as many base stations and, stuff like that. Maybe that's more resilient, right? So I'm not convinced that, people will just abandon 2.4 just because they will, right? I think that there's a
I think
pretty good use case for that.
right now it's case by case, but I see a lot of that because I work in Wi-Fi every day. I see a lot of people saying, we have turned off all 2.4 in our private enterprise network.
But once again, that's for data-driven devices like your laptops and things like that. That I will agree, absolutely. I see that all the time too, right? You're going to do a Wi-Fi deploy, just turn off the 2.4. Why? Because there's all this other junk out there that's doing that, right?
Yeah. It's a real noisy spectrum. You've only got the 3 overlapping channels. You have a lot more that you can work on in 5. We got into the weeds on that one.
But, will we see that with 6? That's what I question. Because honestly, at the moment, 5 is kind of good enough for a lot of things, right? A lot of people are sort of okay with 5, right? Will there be some kind of huge push to say, all right, well, we all need 6, like desperately? I'm not sure about that. Because most people at the moment, they're kind of okay.
Well, it's everybody believes that they need more bandwidth. That's the 5G argument. But as you need more bandwidth, you need more speed.
They don't actually need it. Right?
But you get a short distance. Once you go up from 5 to 6, that spectrum goes up, distance goes down.
Skin depth goes.
Quota gets covered quicker because you need more APs.
More expensive, right?
You need more APs.
And it's not as common, so it's going to cost more per AP, right? So it's great for quota relief, but I don't know how good it is for the actual dealer, right? So another great example about that kind of tendency is when you look at people, in terms of like the drops going into these networks, right? Mm-hmm. This is actually exactly the same thing as the panel thing once again, right? So when we were talking about the panel, right? It's like, oh, there's too many breakers, oversubscribed, it's gonna run away, right? So, when you put the drop into this place, right? And you think to yourself, I've got, all of these wireless access points and all these users, I need a 1 gigabit per second drop, or I need like a 10 gigabit per second drop, right? Or something like that, right? And you put like a little meter on there, like some kind of OR gateway, like some of the stuff that I work on, so whatever, right? And it's like, well, what's your sustained throughput on a 350 person apartment complex, 350 unit apartment complex? And like 200 megabits a second. Right? So it's like I pulled my 1 gigabit from this provider as my backup line, and I pulled my 10 gigabit from these 2 providers, and they each have a license for 2, and I can go all the way up, and I'm using 200 megabits per second. Right? So it's like I need all of it, but it's not actually what's happening. Right? Yeah. So it's like, oh yes, I want my 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi because it's gonna go faster. Sorta. When are you going to use it? I don't know.
I don't know. I've got gigabit at home in theory.
And once in a while it's kind of cool. Okay, I can get my Windows ISO a little faster.
Yeah, only if I'm downloading or uploading stuff does it even come close to mattering to me. But it's still happening so fast that I do need to go and get a glass of water at some point. So click, go get my glass of water, and
Yeah. So
come back and it's
not like there is no use case. There is, right? But I think by and large, people are a little, out of their minds with respect to what they need, or as we said, it's like a quota relief issue, or it's like the panel is actually a quota relief issue to some extent, right? Because some of those people, they want to sell you the new panel, right? It's like, oh, you can't plug all that stuff in. That's the same argument, right? You can't have 350
You got to keep people working, though. You got to keep the low voltage guys working and hooking up Ethernet and multiple drops and everything. If not, what are they going to do?
It's true.
And they'll be right there with all the kids that won't go work in restaurants right now. I accidentally did that. I couldn't resist. That is odd, but I won't go there.
Hey, man.
Hey, man.
That's my addition to that. Hey, man.
Switzerland.
That's all that's for me. I can say a lot of things. I'll just, hey, man. Teach his own.
Yeah. Check out the comment section.
Sure.
So, from a game bandwidth perspective, there's, I think at the end of the day, it's really, don't get too wrapped around one technology. Look at your use case, look at what you're doing. Don't fall.
Understand your fundamentals.
Yeah,
that's what I
like
would
said,
say.
principles and fundamentals.
Understand your fundamentals, right?
Which lead to your use case and what you're trying to accomplish, and do it in a way that makes sense. And if you're talking to the right people about this, it's probably going to impact your budget a little bit differently, right?
Yeah.
Probably better.
It's going to have a net benefit to you.
Yeah.
You'll make a wiser decision.
Not everybody
Probably works better.
in this space is trying to just like cram in really expensive tech for the sake of doing it. And there are some people that are like trying to prevent people from screwing things up.
Yeah.
So, or that not everyone's bad, but it's like there are some knuckleheads out there that really just care about their bottom line, and that's an unfortunate thing. So,
And I guess what I should do one time is try to actually measure that. What is the percentage? Because the emotional feeling is that it's all those guys, right? It's all guys who are just there to go on a leave quota. But I mean, obviously that can't be true, because if that was true, then we would not have a functioning society, right?
Okay,
but like, it just feels that way sometimes, right? Because they're so loud and the things that they do are so incredibly wrong, right? That it overshadows, like the rest of us that, are trying to just do the right thing.
Well, yeah, I just talked to, there was a rail company that will remain unnamed, but they got some really terrible advice about deploying 5G in their rail yard for communication for their hand scanners.
That's pretty terrible advice.
It's awful. It's effing advice, the worst advice ever. I'm like, what? Why would you do that? The scanners don't even have the antenna to pick up the signal.
Why would you do that?
Why would
because
you
it
do that?
relieves the quota
Because
of the guy that sold it to him. That's
a-hole
why.
thought it was like, I can get this guy is new and he'll just believe me and he'll buy the stuff. And it's like, that's the worst thing you could possibly do in this. It does happen. Like, it's to your point. I don't think it's a lot, but there's some buttheads out there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
for sure.
Anyway,
Best thing for that guy.
shop around the solution. Find people that won't do that to you. No point.
5G in the rail yard.
Yeah, 5 year rail yard.
I want to know what the cost per gigabyte that's going to come out to if you go and you pull something like
I
that.
don't even know if you can do it because of all the interference. It's like,
I'm sure you could do it, but I'm just still thinking that the cost per gigabyte of delivery on that
God,
network
you
over a
would have
5 year
to-
period is going to be something astronomical.
You can bounce signals with 5G, but still, it's going to be a really funky game of laser tag.
right. That's the, yeah. So, I mean, it's like I don't know how you do it.
The
Plus,
expenses.
the things moving around the rail yards and interrupting signals, and just it was a mess.
You're not talking like passenger cars and along the for
yard
people to be able to use. You're
passenger-
talking about
like in the yard for like where they're like the actual train yard plus the actual passenger cars.
So people walking around with handheld scanners scanning stuff or tablets, and they're doing maintenance on trains. And
It was a maintenance thing for the rail yard. Like the workers that are in the rail yard for doing like, I don't know. I'm not a rail worker. I don't know. The trains come in, stuff happens to them to make sure that you can continue to use them. Then the trains go out. Whatever that stuff is, that you need like an infrastructure of some kind in order to increase. Like they were using mobile devices and scanning devices, and they wanted to deploy 5G in that environment.
well, that's one of the things that, whether it's 5G, Wi-Fi, CBRS, anything in between, at the root of all that, that's maybe impacting some of the fundamental decisions is a lot of these organizations now they're buying 10, 12,000 tablets for their workforce. And they've been gradually moving away from paper. And the only way to put your maintenance workers out there is they've got to be connected wirelessly.
Right.
So whoever comes in and has the best story is going to end up winning out with that. Who's going to make them feel good? Who's going to make them feel like productivity is increasing? I could do more things from a maintenance perspective with less labor and faster, better, less break fix to do, that type of thing. So there is going to be a wireless solution in that. There has to be, because it doesn't matter if it's oil and gas or if it's trains, planes, automobiles. Everybody's walking around with some kind of untethered device to do their job.
Sure.
Right, but again, like 5G is not the solution.
Well, I mean, sometimes it is, just
Not
not always.
Not in that,
in a train
not in
yard,
that
right?
train yard. I promise you, not in that train yard.
In that train yard, it's probably a bit of overkill at a minimum.
No, I wouldn't even use the word overkill. It's just complete nonsense, right?
I was trying to be nice.
Well, the devices don't even have the antenna to connect to the signal that they were using. So it's like, why are you putting 5G in there? Why don't you just put money in a bucket and light it on fire? That's idiotic.
Well, we do that
quota,
quite a
man.
bit.
Well, again, release quota. I mean, that's my whole
Release
point. It's
quota.
like some people just they have their minds focused on other things like making money instead of actually like helping with infrastructure.
Setting money on fire.
Right. It's just there's a better way to do things. That was my whole point.
Yeah. No,
I
I got you.
appreciate you trying to be nice to that guy, but I'm sure he was doing that for a reason.
Yeah. So the thing about the 5G,
I have a daily
conversation-
quota of being nice twice a day.
Okay.
So I'm halfway there.
All right.
The thing about the 5G thing that I hope has finally died out is for a while, right? Pretty much all the cellular manufacturers and, of course, all of the carriers were basically touting 5G as being what you would use in your home, like as if you would
The
not
fixed wireless
have,
last mile.
like, and I'm just like, I'm so glad that it seems like the marketing of that has come to an end.
It's really hard defying physics.
Yeah.
Because that was just complete nonsense. Right? It's kind of like your train New York thing. It's like, oh, let's go take this. Right? It's just like, come on, guys. Like, are you serious? You actually trying to tell people that it's like it's
If I
ridiculous?
put a ultra wideband radio on a light pole on your typical suburban street, how many houses could I
Zero,
potentially?
because you would never get through the windows or the wall. Zero. It would reach zero, and that radio would cost like $100,000 or something crazy like
That's
that.
just for the radio.
It's just for the radio. Yeah.
You still got that thing's got a backhaul somehow.
Right.
Nonsense that people are saying. Or actually, for all I know, they're still saying it, but it's just that I stopped paying attention to it because every time I heard that, I was laughing so hard at the people. That didn't
Well, also,
understand what they were talking
sometimes that
about.
could be an executive team that's like, hey, where else could we use this technology? Someone's like in the home. It's like, great, I want a marketing campaign.
What do we have the most of?
Right, like we put it in the home. Great, we'll do a marketing campaign around that. And it's like, no, none of the engineers were spoken to be like, hey, is this even a thing? And it's like, no, it's a great
Oh,
marketing
right.
campaign, but it's not a thing. You can't do it.
This is exactly what we started with, right? It's let's go move all of the executives away from the place where they make the planes. Oh,
Right.
let's install executives that don't even have a STEM background. Oh, airplanes crash. I wonder why. Oh,
It's a very valid point. Fundamentals, man.
it's all
I hope
about
we
the
don't get
fundamentals.
subpoenaed for that.
Can we just beep it? We'll just beep it out, right? We can do that. Does that work?
Why? I have a little bit of an edge to it. But I still fly on Boeings all the time. Well, not all the time now, the last year and a half,
That's
but
true. What are we drinking here? What is this?
it's Redbreast.
Redbreast?
It is
Good
Redbreast.
old Irish whiskey?
Yes.
Whiskey.
So there's a little bit of background or stuff about us that I think is good to come out from time to time. And you guys are going to be on this a lot. So you, sir,
Yep.
are a movie director and an actor when you're not a technologist.
Yeah.
Award-winning.
Yes, true story. Put me on the spot a little bit, but yes. Thank you.
You picked up the booze, so let's
yeah.
talk about something else.
Yes, the movie's called Thank You 5. It's about a theater production that struggles to opening night due to a narcissistic director and dysfunctional cast and crew. It's filmed all on location in Chicago, using all Chicago talent and crew as well. Co-written and directed by myself, my buddy Mike Barnard, a very talented guy as well.
And you're the narcissist director.
I am unfortunately the narcissistic director that I promise it's not what I'm like in real life, but that is the character that I played in the film. But yeah, with the dialogue of the film is all improvised, minus the script that was written for the theater production.
Okay.
Mike actually wrote a script, like every terrible dramatic trope you could toss into to make a trashy play. He basically used that, and then we improvised around that. The story was written. So it wasn't like we just got there and like hit roll camera and we're like, see what we get today. Like we had a very specific way of trying to navigate through that. And then to your point, yes, we just left Sunnyside Up Film Fest in Oklahoma. We actually picked up Best Picture award from the festival director, a couple Best Actor awards. Megan Murphy won Best Actress, Theo Capel won Best Supporting Actor.
Which one was he?
Theo plays the character of Warren. Megan plays the character of Alex. She's the lead. She's the lead female.
Okay.
And then Theo is absolutely hilarious, and he's been noted a couple times for like, if you've watched the film, it's like, who is this guy? He's incredible. That's always Theo. It's like Theo, and then Jason Amblo is the other guy that everyone's like, that guy's hilarious. So, but yeah, we just did that. We picked up Best Ensemble as well at that fest. We won Best Ensemble at Woods Hole up in Massachusetts, which was incredibly humbling considering the films that were screening there. We also picked up another Best Picture award at Red Dirt Film Fest, also in Oklahoma. Who knew? Apparently, Oklahoma loves our films. Apparently, so there was that, and then I'm forgetting some other things because I did not come prepared.
Did you win something in California, or
did
they not care in California?
We did not. No, we did not win it. I don't.
Sorry,
we were an official selection in Coronado Island Film Fest, which is an awesome film festival.
Okay.
I was hoping to be able to go, but this was unfortunately all during COVID. So we only went to the one festival, which was Red Dirt, at the beginning before COVID outbreak, and then at the end, towards when some of the states are opening up, Oklahoma did one in person again. So the only two film fests I've been to were in Oklahoma in person. So everything else has been remote. So try to support the film world as much as we can. The indie film world is so incredibly valuable, but oftentimes gets overshadowed for like really popular Netflix shows and other things. But there's some really awesome voices out there and some really great films. So I appreciate you even bringing it up.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Sounds awesome.
Thank you. I got to watch it, and it was great.
Thank you.
So, you have anything interesting going on?
Me?
Yeah. Well, always. Have you hacked anything recently?
Hacking your BMW or
Tesla?
Too many stories.
Tesla,
Too many stories. Yeah. So the more recent one has been the screwing around with the autopilot, of course, on the Tesla, right? Seeing how far you push that. Screwing around with the.
How far did you push it?
I was going to say, I was like, do I want to ask how far you actually?
I want to know. Yeah.
The autopilot systems, they're not really autopilot, as you know.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just assisted driving right there. And one of the things that I was fooling around with was, well, okay, if it's assisted driving, right? How can you make it so that you would want to use this in a world where it's like kind of trying to help you, you know what I mean? Instead of what you sort of expect it to do, which is to kind of like just drive by itself, right? And so I started trying to think about, well, what could we install in the car and things like that. And I came up with a few, neat little things, right? So one of them was if you could put something in the car where you'd have the other people that were in it kind of be able to help sort of be an assistant driver other than a driver, because the whole thing is...
You're intentionally making backseat drivers?
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
I was going to say, that's kind of where my head went. I'm like, this is...
Because I have a hard enough time with that with my 6-year-old yells at me what to do.
I mean, if you think about it, right? The entire car can drive itself without a driver there, right? So that means that all the signals that go, you can drive the car, you can just do it from a tablet, right? And so, or anything, right, for that matter. So that means that if you just mounted tablets, what if you could have that as being, driver assistance? What if you could have it so you could essentially pass off? You see what I'm saying? Like the responsibility of driver assistance without having to have to stop the car and have people
Interesting.
switch, So that's one of the things that I was fooling around with. It hasn't gotten quite that far yet, but I think that might be one of my summer projects for weird things I'm going to have.
Yeah.
So if you're behind the wheel and you get tired, whoever's in the rear passenger seat, you could just say, "Hey, take over. I might close my eyes for a bit."
Yeah,
that's great for Uber.
Pass control.
Just pick somebody up, and you're like, "Here, you drive," and just like cross arms and knock out.
Where are you going? You choose. Go.
You choose. It's all yours, man.
That's funny. All right. Well, I had a little bit of Red Breast gaming bandwidth product. Congratulations again on the movie.
Man. Thanks.
And so, summer project is drive from anywhere in a car.
Well,
without
pass control. Pass
control.
That's kind of one of the things that I think I want to mess with.
Okay. I can't wait to hear about that.
Maybe test that in a closed location, like in a truck, away from people. Probably a good thing to do.
Yeah. We done?
All right, let's do it. Cheers, guys. Thanks, man. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Yep.